Mm-hmm.
Wishing everybody a formal good morning now from the Cultural Alliance of Maine. I'm Linda Nelson, and I'm coming to you from the land of the Sagadahoc people on the unceded Wabanaki territory in Bath, Maine. I'm grateful for the big privilege of serving alongside a bunch of my peers on the steering committee for this pilot project, which we have dubbed the Cultural Alliance of Maine. It's a one-year pilot project. And about 3 months ago, some of the hardworking members of the steering committee raised enough money to hire a director to steer the ship. And as she likes to say, we are actually sailing the ship at the same time as we are building the ship, which means that we're doing advocacy and holding these events and trying to move the cultural sector forward at the same time that we're trying to figure out what is the best long-term organization and alliance for us as we move forward as a cultural sector united. But so Carla, who I hope many of you have met already and know, is just finishing up her first 3 months, and we are delighted with her work and want to thank her for her work. So I'd like to start with a virtual round of applause for Carla Pugliese. She is our pilot project director for the Cultural Alliance of Maine, and I'm going to turn it over to Carla.
Thank you, Linda. Oh my goodness, that was far too kind. It is wonderful to be here with all of you. I have so enjoyed getting to speak with and now start to see as we can be out in the world together again. So many of you, as we do the work of this pilot year and figuring out what the Cultural Alliance of Maine can best be and how we can best serve. And I'm excited to continue to do that this morning. So our plan today is to hear from a few folks who are grappling with a number of different kind of hot topic issues that we know are top of mind for a lot of you as we stare at the summer season that we are really already in, but sort of looking at the next 3 months. And I'm going to hand it over to each of them just to speak on one of these topics. And first, a few minutes, kind of share what they've been thinking about, grappling with, and then we're going to open up breakout rooms that you can self-select into and continue the conversations. So if you're really piqued on an idea, or you too have been thinking about something that our speakers speak about, there'll be a chance to be in breakout together and just like have some time to hash it out, share resources, ask questions, strategize, vent, all that good stuff. So we're going to kick it off with Abbe Levin from the Maine Office of Tourism. And Abbe's going to share with us some of what the Office of Tourism has been doing, thinking about cultural tourism, especially this summer, but also going forward. Abbe, I'll turn it over to you.
Thanks, Carla. Good morning, everybody. It's nice to see everyone here again. So I've been asked to very briefly share what the Maine Office of Tourism is up to this summer in terms of marketing efforts and cultural tourism. So as I'm sure most of you can imagine, just like your individual organizations, we too have had to be very quick on our feet to respond to how we market during this time. So I shared with my colleagues here that this is truly like hot cultural summer news, because everything that I'm going to share with you, and I'm going to provide just a couple of quick examples of what we're doing. For us is, we don't market this way normally, ever. We don't market at the last minute. We don't niche market. So this is really a different way of us doing business, but it's in direct response to this, year of being in a pandemic. But quickly, I want to share with all of you a little bit of a separate, huge marketing campaign that we've been doing in response to last summer, which was, and I'm sure all of you experienced this, a lot of people were in the great outdoors in Maine. And as a result, land and our resources were not always used properly. And so the campaign is called Look Out for Me, ME. I'm going to share it with Carla. It's a complete toolkit that any of you can use and sort of translate, if you will, into how you're doing business. But the messaging around it is very specific to looking out for our resources, whether it's our natural resources, our cultural resources, and just sort of being respectful of our state. So I'll share that with all of you. But I'm going to tick through these marketing efforts. First is an effort that we launched in the spring. It is a very targeted, paid social media that launched. What we're doing is about 10 to 12 days of a specific event or exhibition. So in the spring, we kicked it off with the PMA's Art in Bloom exhibit. It then went into the Portland Bach Experience, which was an event that just closed in Portland. And then we're next off into a Farnsworth exhibit, Bates Dance Festival. I can tell you all that we don't just pick these things out of a hat. They're chosen for a reason. And if you come into my breakout room, I can talk more about that. But so far, the results have been pretty overwhelmingly impressive. For those of you that like analytics, the combined total reach of just those two paid boosts was almost 400,000 people with lots and lots of engagement. So we feel like it's been a very, very positive, targeted effort so far. The second is on visitmaine.com. We have a section specific to trip ideas, and they're curated. The content is kept, updated frequently. We just in the last week launched a series of 10 new trip ideas. It's art and ales. The purpose of them is to provide fun, engaging ways to kind of get people out and about a little bit off the beaten path. And it's drinking beer and looking at art. So we think we're pretty excited about those. And then lastly, and this is the one that's very big and probably none of you will see it unless you're out of state, is a summer art marketing campaign that's across multiple platforms, social, print, streaming, including radio, Spotify, Pandora, that is promotes the visual arts, theater, music, and festivals. And the call to action is to drive people to visit Maine to learn more about all of those topic areas. So these are things that we just don't normally do, but we're doing them because we think that the time is right and because the cultural community needs to be promoted in this way. I think I'm going to wrap it there because I'm probably close to 3 minutes. And again, if any of this is, you want to learn more about, I'll see you in the chat room.
Perfect. Thank you, Abby. That was wonderful. And yes, anyone who is keen to learn more or talk more with Abby and hear more about these initiatives, you'll have a chance to pop into her breakout room in just a few moments. I wonder now if we might pass it over to Shoni, Currier from Bates Dance Festival to talk a little bit about what's been top of mind for you, and especially as you've been doing your programming for this summer amidst all of the shifting regulations and protocols and changes in the behavior of the public.
Yes. Hi, everyone. I'm Shoni Currier. I am the director of the Bates Dance Festival. I use she, her pronouns, and I am based in Lewiston. And it's so nice to see all of you and so many people to whom I owe emails. Hi, all of you. So we are running a festival this summer. We canceled last year. We canceled really early in the game. We canceled on March 30th, I think. And we're really, building the boat while floating it, building the boat while sinking, it feels like. We are running 4 outdoor performances that are ticketed, 3 outdoor films ticketed, 2 outdoor free concerts, and then for online, we're doing 4 online performances and 3 free online artist talks. And it's been really wild kind of seeing what ticket buyer behavior has been so far. The online shows are just crickets, right? Absolute crickets. Though we realize we might see, lots of reservations that day or in the 20 minutes before the show. And so we're kind of keeping those options open for people, but really the outdoor performances are starting to sell really, really well. We had built these to be COVID proof, right? So we had built them to be outdoors. They have distance built into them. 2 of them are processionals. And so they, you're moving, you're automatically going to be 6 feet away from people. And now it feels like, oh, could we have more people at these shows? We had set the limit at 50. Now we're like, we could have 100. Do we want 100? Do we want to manage moving that many people? I'd like to make the revenue, but it doesn't. Now it feels like we've put in all these restrictions that were meant to make us all feel safe and to follow guidelines. And now they are just restrictions. We have only restricted ourselves, basically. And I don't know that there is a way for us to get around it at this point. And we also have an in-person gallery show that in a perfect world would be a sort of open gallery, and we're partnering with LA Arts. I saw Jim Parakilis on here and with Space Gallery on that. In a perfect world, it would just be an open gallery situation. And instead we're ticketing it so that people only have a 20-minute time slot to be in and interact with this video piece. So really everything was built for massive restriction and for a lockdown at any moment. And now it feels like, what should we do to make everything feel more welcoming and to make everything feel more current? Because I don't know that anybody is going to show up wearing a mask, but I'm paying my staff to show up and I want them to feel safe. They don't have a choice about where they go that day. And so kind of balancing that, making sure everybody feels safe, the people who are made to be there and the people who are opting in to be there. And just some other little points. We did a choose your own ticket price. So you could choose either a $5 ticket or a $20 ticket for any of the shows. And almost everybody is choosing the $20 ticket. We also canceled an online training program. So we're running an in-person, kind of much smaller training program than usual, and then an online one for high school students and an online one for adults. And the one for high school students was, again, just crickets. Last year it was packed. In the fall it did well, we did one then, and this summer, and I think it was really when that age group could get vaccinated. It was like, what are we doing? How are we going to dance in front of Zoom? But the adult program is really full. And I'm feeling like those might be people who never would have come, who couldn't have afforded to come to the festival, who didn't have the time to take 3 weeks, but they're adults who can spend 3 hours a day doing it. And so is that something we should continue forever, right? There's this real question about how we continue with the accessibility of the online programs, that it's so essential, but what's your cutoff point for that, right? At what point are you investing a lot of staff time and marketing and resources into something that the 10 people who are doing it really appreciate, but it's just the 10 people who are doing it, right? Mm-hmm. So those are some of the things we're thinking about right now. And then just the feeling that I feel really removed from the like meat of what I do, right? When you're trying so hard to just survive. I spent a few minutes this morning watching a video by a choreographer who we've worked with before, and kind of watching her new residency in process video. And I was just like, oh, this is what I used to do. I used to watch people dance and support artists and figure out which pieces could come to the community, and based on all sorts of things, not based on who has an outdoor show and who's got a whole company who's vaccinated, and who meets regulations. So just, I don't know if anybody else is feeling that way, but just I feel so distant from the actual like content of what I do right now. So
yeah, thank you, Shoni.
But excited.
I feel like there was a lot there. I saw nodding around the room as I popped through and looked at people's screens. I think there's a lot there that resonated. I wonder if we could pick up on that thread that you were talking about this sort of balance of virtual and how long do we do this and how do we take advantage of the opportunities, and pass it over to Steve Bromage to talk about exactly that I know has been top of mind for you, Steve.
Yeah, thanks so much, Carla. I'm Steve Bromage, Executive Director of Maine Historical Society. And yeah, there are so many different areas we could dive into here, but I just want to kind of emphasize and focus a couple minutes on the opportunity in the disruption of the pandemic and how we're kind of navigating that as we both kind of get through this transitional phase and kind of look to the future. So just by background, Maine Historical Society has been around for a long time. We have our 200th birthday next year, and our mission is to preserve and share Maine's story. So kind of to bookend this in the physicality of things, when the pandemic landed, as everybody recalls, everybody was really focused on the gear up for the bicentennial. We had been doing programming through beginning in 2019 with our Wabanaki exhibition related to that. And so literally we had just installed our physical exhibition, and that Thursday night, like the day the first case was confirmed in Maine was supposed to be our big members opening where we were going to be celebrating this new bicentennial exhibit. So, that Tuesday, Wednesday, of course, like everybody else, we just shut down and said, we can't do it. And we tried to initially look in kind of longer timeframes, knowing that it wasn't going to open up quickly. So there we were with a physical exhibition in Portland that lots of preparation had gone on to. And then like everybody, there was the moment of, how do you keep the door, how do you survive as an organization, and then how do you pivot your work? So we were fortunate to get a first PPP round, a first round PPP, which helped us just kind of know we were going to have our staff more or less intact. So that let us pivot to, all right, how can we engage our public and how can we kind of provide service and make sure our staff is doing meaningful work that also has some kind of impact out there. So for us, we very quickly, focused on remote engagement and how we could do that. Now, one of our key strategic issues is where, again, we have a headquarters down in Portland, but we have a statewide mission, and believe, our mission is about every corner and every community and every person of Maine. And we also have an audience is everybody who feels connected or has a connection to Maine across the country. So for us, one of the explicit things in our strategic plan is how do you serve people who can't get to Greater Portland on a regular basis, and how do you make sure you're engaging them actively? For us, so kind of heading into the pandemic, one really strong foundation we had was this Maine Memory Network, our digital museum, which has been online for actually about 20 years now, but it features content contributed by more than 270 organizations around Maine. So it's very grassroots, it's very boiled up, and there is content literally from every corner of the state that is really their creation, their participation. So we started with this vast body of materials, hundreds of online exhibits, context and information to share with people. And I think, as we all kind of got 2 to 3 months into the pandemic, you could see, people were very isolated, and there's a desperation, I think, for opportunities to connect, to get information from home, to be entertained, and all of these things, and just try to get some perspective. So for us, we really honed in on Zoom pretty quickly. We had been using it for board committee meetings and such like that, so we had our feet wet, but we quickly kind of decided that let's try this. And in the early days, there's context for this pandemic, so we were having historians of medicine on to talk about what is these pandemics, and trying to provide historical context for this overwhelming moment. But over the course of the year, we really doubled down and we invested in it. We did our annual meeting that way. And probably at this point, we've done about 40 programs. And all of those are recorded. All of those are online. And I think Shoni made the point about, can people catch it in that time and place? In a sense, all of this becomes MHS on demand. And all of those programs are digital, accessible to people whenever, however they're interested, and they can find it so that they have time. I think another foundation for us was also, we've worked really hard over the last 5 or 10 years to do really responsive programming. So what's going on in the community? So our exhibitions have been on immigration. Again, we led the bicentennial looking at Wabanaki issues. We did a big thing on food, on the paper industry. So we were also kind of poised to think about what's the context and information we could provide. So the other piece of this, in this horrific year since George Floyd's murder, the question is, how can we provide context for that? So a lot of our public programming has really focused on that. So, there are issues on Black history in Maine and intolerance. We've had a number of great panels that brought all kinds of people in the community together, provide perspective. So that's been an important thread in a way to kind of continue to engage audiences through that. Second to last point I'll make is we also had to figure as an organization, what does a fundraiser look like? One of our big fundraisers annually is something called the Maine History Maker Award, where we recognize a contemporary Mainer or institution that's making differences. And we had LL Bean teed up for the bicentennial. So we had to kind of completely reinvent what that was and make that a fully digital event. And that was actually a really creative opportunity for us to kind of build our digital toolkit. So there's a lot in the works. So I'll wrap up by saying, and now here we are, all of a sudden things were wide open, until February, we didn't know if we'd be doing a physical exhibition this year. Was it going to make sense given all of the dynamics? We decided to, and we just opened a couple weeks ago an exhibit called Begin Again, Reckoning with Intolerance in Maine. And so as people are rushing kind of back to openness, I'm glad we did the physical, but it will be, it's pretty intense. It's a challenging exhibit that really looks hard at these issues and how they play out in Maine. So I'll just close by saying for us, the virtual is going to be a fundamental lead part of what we do going forward. And I think for us, just in terms of public programming, we're going to really focus on making sure, because I'm not sure if I said, I think we tripled participation in our public programs last year. The numbers went way up. And those people are joining and they're reaching out and on the chat, having super engaged in the conversation. So from a mission perspective, we are going to be leading with that. And we really aren't planning much in terms of, our gallery's open and the Longfellow House is open, but we're not rushing to have people in for a big milling lecture type program. So I'll stop there and pick up later.
Thank you, Steve. No, thank you so much. And folks will have the opportunity to keep having these conversations and join you in digging into those topics more in a breakout room in just a few moments. I think I'm going to pass it over now to Linda, because I know, Linda, we've talked a lot about how you're really thinking about how do we move beyond sort of what Steve was talking about of, just making statements about racial equity and the work that needs to be done to shift the world forward and actually turn it into action. And what are we doing on the ground rather than just saying? So I'll pass it over to you now to speak for a few moments.
Thanks so much, Carla. We really hope that our colleague Mark Bassier from the Portland Museum of Art would be joining us today and to be able to talk about this from the perspective. So I'm going to just share a few things that we're doing at Portland Ovations and also at the Maine Association of Nonprofits, where I'm on the board. Couple of questions and then invite those of you for whom this is top of mind to join me in the breakout room. I think one of the dangers of summer in Maine always is that, it overwhelms everything else, especially in the cultural sector. And with all of us coming back from the pandemic, I think the question will be, how do we hold on to the work we've been doing, not go back to a normal that didn't work for everybody? So how do we hold on to the access? How do we hold on to the statements of commitment? The tragedies, the many, many tragedies of the last year, the last 18 months, the last century have really, with a pandemic, it's almost like it gave cultural organizations in particular more time to dive into those more deeply. And I think what I'm hearing from the field is that as people get busy again with working with the summer season and putting on shows and performances, that where are they going to continue that work and how are they going to continue that work? And I think especially in the cultural sector, it's easy to see where that work is happening in our programming. And that's important. And it is important work to, as Steve was just saying, to center BIPOC voices and to center the work of marginalized people and for us to really do that programmatic work. I think even perhaps more importantly, the work is about how we do things as institutions, and especially as nonprofits who work within the culture of philanthropy, which is very imbricated in terms of racism and equity issues. As a nonprofit, the very financial model by which we're operating is about paying attention to wealth and inherited wealth and who has that inherited wealth over the centuries. So while we made these commitments and these statements a year ago, what the challenge that we're all talking about that we want to talk about is where is the action and what is the action and how are we changing the actual process by which we work and the way our institutions are structured in addition to our programmatic, what we're presenting publicly. So at Portland Ovations, we're a privileged organization. We have the ability to work with consultants. So our strategic plan consultants, we're working with Maine intercultural communications consultants who work with a tool called the Intercultural Developmental Inventory. I recommend looking at it. I think it's super, super interesting. And but there's a lot of the smaller organizations that I work with as a consultant and that we work with through MAMP are looking for these resources now too, how to do the internal work, who to work with, what tools to use to do the internal work to make the changes that need to be made in our actual structures of how we work within this environment, as well as in what we're programming and what we're doing. And I think that that's the main thing that I'll say for now. And I hope that people that for whom this is really top of mind and stays top of mind will join me in the breakout room and we can all talk about it and share some more information.
Beautiful.
Thanks.
Thank you, Linda. Thank you so much. I'm going to pass it now to our last panel speaker to pick up on some of these themes. I know, Nat, that you have been doing a lot of thinking and work, not only around racial equity work and justice work, but also workforce development and sustainability, and that thinking about how do we shift our internal cultures and the way that we build our organization. So I will pass it over to you.
Thanks. Yeah, so I'm Nat. I'm the Arts Program Officer at the Onion Foundation. And I just want to thank Linda for what she said, because thinking about equity is not a task that we should do once a month at our meetings, but it's a thing that we should be thinking about every day. And I want to note that the Onion Foundation has some grant funds available that can help organizations think about some of that. So if people have questions about that, I'd be happy to field your questions and find out where you are and see if we can help out. But in terms of labor and workforce, it's been a really interesting year of an inflection point where I think people are really starting to reckon with how systems had worked previously in the cultural sector and how things are working in a kind of a disaster scenario and where we want to go. And I've been paying attention to the artist side of things. What do artists want? The organizational side of things. How do organizations make decisions about how they want to employ cultural workers and organize themselves? And then the worker side of things, where workers are finding ways of having solidarity conversations and speaking up for themselves, and maybe making new decisions about how to rank their daytime job as an important thing in their life, not as the most important thing. So I was just going to share a couple things. I learned about a survey that happened in Massachusetts recently that showed that at least a third of cultural organizations had serious concerns about staff morale and mental health, concerns about excessive leadership exhaustion, concerns about excessive strains on staff capacity, and that a lot of organizations had reduced their staff capacities and are nervous about rebuilding, not because they don't have the money to do so today, maybe with relief funds or generous donors or additional philanthropy. They've stabilized themselves, but they're uncertain about future earned revenues or future grant funding. So those are not surprises to us, but sometimes it's helpful to know that someone did a survey and it's a codified thing that we can mark as a point in time that it's a thing we're learning. As I was saying before, there are all these new ways of people finding points of solidarity around their concerns. I've seen some really interesting open Google documents where people that have some sort of shared experience are talking openly, maybe not with their name attached, but about what's happening with them. There was a really good one for adjunct arts faculty, naming what their salaries were. And it was really interesting to see the wide range. People were putting in, not necessarily names of schools, but cities and states where they were located. I've also seen some similar things with artists and how they're being compensated by arts organizations that they're working with. And then some of these artists have banded together to create white papers or manifestos or new working norms. So Shoni was mentioning earlier, she's bringing an artist, Janira Castro, to Maine this summer that's having a show at Space and I think at LA Arts. And she and some other people created a platform called Creating New Futures that's a really deep look at the experiences of dance and performance artists, mostly in New York City, but about the stories and the things that they've dealt with in their careers and how they want to empower themselves to ask for something different. So there's a few different discipline specific groups like this. I think it's important for the artists who are in those communities to pay attention, but it's equally important that presenting organizations, nonprofit staff, board members, and funders take some time and read through these resources, because it's a really great opportunity to hear some honest feelings and feedback about the systems that we've all participated in and supported, and helps us think about what we might change in the future. I've also been attending this national group called Getting Creative Workers Working, which is an ad hoc group of folks mostly in arts and culture support systems who are trying to think about accessing American Recovery Plan funds to support WPA style new initiatives that might get artists back employed in this post COVID, if we're calling it that, scenario. There's not a lot that I've heard about in Maine, but I know the Maine Arts Commission is trying to work on something like that. The important thing to note there is that there are funds distributed around the country that people are accessing outside of their arts commissions, right? So there are municipal funds, recovery funds, there are county American Recovery Plan funds, and there are state funds. And in other places, people are well organized to speak with their local officials about accessing some of these funds. And that's one of our missions with the Cultural Alliance here, is that we want to empower ourselves to be having those conversations and those relationships with the people who make the decisions about how those monies are distributed.
Yeah.
I'll just end by saying all this is not, it's distressing, I guess, to think about how things are and have been, but I also feel an enormous amount of hope that people are banding together and talking more openly about what they need and what they're hoping for. And there are no easy answers to the questions about how we're taking care of our workers, but there's a huge appetite for this conversation, and I welcome talking to anyone about it if people have thoughts or questions or ideas. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Nat. Thank you to all of our speakers. It was really, I feel like I could just sit and listen to you each talk about what you're grappling with and just sort of hear and take it in for a really long time. There's just so much really important and good work that is going on. So what we are going to do now is open it up to breakout rooms. So we have each of our speakers will be in a breakout room to talk more about what they have shared today, and really just open up the conversation for anyone to join them. Hello, everyone. Welcome back.
We're the first ones out of our room.
I know. You guys are the rule followers, I suppose. So the room was closing and you clicked out. All right.
It's always so much like Star Trek, isn't it? Like we're totally beaming up and landing in a new place.
Exactly. We've all beamed back down. It is wonderful to see you all again. I hope that all of your conversations were wonderful. we'd love to hear maybe just one or two quick takeaways from each room. So maybe we could either have the leader of that room, or if you want to deputize someone else to speak, room leaders, you can pass the mic to someone else and just share one or two things that you all spoke about. Linda, perhaps I can, oh, go ahead, Shoni. Yes, please, go.
Yeah, I can just briefly, we had a great little conversation about kind of all of our different protocols, which are different for indoor organizations versus outdoor organizations. It was brought up the different regulations from different performing unions, and how like the equity rules are different than the AGMA rules, are different than the CDC rules and the requirements for housing. So that's this challenge that I haven't been thinking about at all, but that because we just don't have a ton of union dancers who come up here. So that was a really interesting challenge to hear about. And then also a awesome resource, or I was very excited about it, is called, Dave, am I gonna get right? Thunder Ticks. Which is what the Camden Opera House uses. And that system is small and scrappy, is how it was described to us, but they will automatically, you can choose to have empty seats built in around ticket order. So when somebody buys tickets, then they get empty seats around them automatically, or you can put in empty rows. And so I just thought that was a good resource to consider right now.
Awesome. Thank you, Shoni. And I saw that you all popped that resource into the collaborative document, which is wonderful, which you all have access to that. We'll also be sharing it out in our recap of this event. Let's hear quickly from another room.
I'll take off here very, very quickly. Our room is really grappling with the differences for the business models in terms of where our priorities and our funding go, because equity issues need to take time and need work with board and staff on governance issues. And so it's all about time and money, as we know, and where our priorities are. Nancy, one of the other members of the group, did you want to add into that, please?
Yes, thank you. The thing that really stood out to me is that we're all grappling with, how do we stop the moving train and deal with the equity justice things that we all want to deal with, or how do we integrate that work with all of the work of the summer? Linda just pointed out, we were a really small group. And so there is a piece of that balancing thing. What do we do first? How do we do it? How do we keep the racial equity and justice in the foreground while we're trying to survive in other ways as well?
Josie, did you want to add something? I thought Josie might have wanted to say something.
That's sort of the gist of what we talked about. We also talked a little bit about the way that the staff of an organization is working toward racial equity goals in tandem with maybe where the board of directors is or the governance structure, and how sometimes there's some dissonance there. And that's been a challenge for organizations in this past year as we work to address this challenge, ongoing work.
Mm-hmm.
So we put some additional tools in the collaborative document, especially Theater for Young Audiences and Michael Bobbitt, and some different resources people might look to who want to advance their racial and equity work. Thanks.
Oh, wonderful. Thank you. Thank you all. Nat, maybe we can hear a sentence or so from your room.
Yeah, we focused mostly on the question about paying artists and how much to pay artists and how do we make those decisions and figure that out. And we talked about a New York-based organization called Working Artists for the Greater Economy, WAGE, which has set sort of some standard guidelines for how to make some of those decisions based on what kind of a thing an artist is doing. And it's not a perfect system, but it's one thing to look at and maybe help orient around. And we had I think a shared desire to continue that conversation.
Awesome. Awesome. Thank you. Before we go to Steve and Abby, I wanted to be mindful of time. I know some of you will likely have to jump right at 10. So I just want to say We will be sharing all of this out, and we also want to invite all of you to come and be participants in future events and be on our panel of speakers. We really want to showcase your stories from all around the state and all around the sector. And we'll be putting more plugs for that in our newsletters and things like that going forward. So if you have to jump, don't worry. All of this will be recorded in the document and in this recording. Steve, I'll hand it over to you now for your room. Share a couple of takeaways.
I think one of the things, so we were virtual versus in person, and I think one of the things we really focused on is how that really depends organization by organization. First of all, we each have our own mojos and audience and dynamics and needs and sense of place and community and scale and all that. And I think one of the areas that we got into that was really positive was really the opportunity to focus at, the power of both the virtual and the person, and choosing the right tools for the right content, for the right art form, for the right program and the right audience. And so really it's using it to expand and be more effective, and picking the format in person versus virtual based on the content. I think that was one of our big takeaways. Annie, you took some notes. I don't know if anybody else from the room wants to add anything else. Nutshell.
All right. Beautiful. Thank you, Steve. Abby, how about your room?
I think the most predominant, topic, if you will, was that we're all working in the moment, right? And even events are being adapted, changed, grown, built. And so, I guess the takeaway for me is, Carolyn asked me, like, should I be bombarding you with this information? And my answer is yes, because I can adapt to this in the moment time that we're in and do what I can to promote these events and help boost your organization. So absolutely keep me posted as things shift. And I think that was the big issue for us, was how much we're all operating in the moment and how to respond to that.
Thank you. That feels like a beautiful encapsulation of so much of what we've talked about. We're all operating in the moment, and don't shy away from connectivity. Reach out, share what you're doing, ask questions, ask for resources. We are all here to be helping each other, and we as the Cultural Alliance are here to be fostering that connectivity and making it easier for you to get those resources and connect with each other. That's our mission and goal. I want to say thank you, and I want to hand it back to Linda to say a couple of closing words as people pop off. It was wonderful to see you all.
I hope that everybody in this room is on the mailing list for the Cultural Alliance of Maine, so you can get Carla's great weekly newsletters filled with information, filled with resources, the links to these notes, and the link to all these people. So we are our best resources, and thanks for joining us today. And we look forward to seeing you again soon. Thank you, Carla. Thanks to everybody.
Thanks all. Take care. See you all soon.